Hello, friends! Los Angeles, America's film city, is home to Hollywood, a place known for its iconic films where the city often faces destruction, whether by earthquakes, tsunamis, tornadoes, or even alien invasions. Los Angeles has been destroyed countless times on screen, yet in reality, it now faces a catastrophic disaster caused by fire. The devastation is so immense, with heart-wrenching images of destruction everywhere. One particularly frightening phenomenon is a fire tornado, which was seen in an area known as Palisades. Additionally, a terrifying video shows a man trapped in his home as flames surrounded him, his voice offering reassurance. "It's going to be okay," while the fire closed in. Fortunately, firefighters rescued the individual in time, but tragically, many others have not been so fortunate. At least 24 people have already lost their lives, and the fire has ravaged nearly 40,000 acres. The fire has been burning for over a week, and as of now, it's still ongoing. Over 12,000 buildings have been completely destroyed, displacing more than 180,000 people. Additionally, over 200,000 people have received evacuation orders, and according to JP Morgan's estimates, this will result in a financial loss of approximately $50 billion to Los Angeles. This is not a single isolated fire, but multiple fires that have erupted in different locations. The fire in Palisades started on the morning of January 7th. That same night, fires also broke out in Eaton and Hearst. By January 9th, the fire spread to Kenneth, Lydia, Archer, Woodley, and Sunset. By January 12th, the fire in Lydia was nearly extinguished, and the one in Kenneth was about 90% controlled. However, the fires in Eaton and Palisades were still only partially contained, with just 15% and 11% controlled, respectively. What makes this situation even more shocking is that it's happening in January, a month when California typically experiences the highest rainfall of the year, making it the wettest month. So, how did we end up with such intense wildfires? What exactly caused this devastating situation? To understand this, we need to first look at the geographical conditions. In this case, the problem was a lack of sufficient rainfall in Southern California this year, which led to lower humidity levels and caused the vegetation to dry out. The air became much drier than usual, and on top of that, there were strong winds, powerful offshore winds known as Santa Ana winds. These winds make fire weather worse by pushing dry, hot air into the area. The Rocky Mountains, situated along the western coast of the U.S., create low-pressure areas near California's coast, and this pressure difference causes the winds to form. When these winds descend from the mountains, they warm up, causing the humidity to drop below 10%. This leads to extremely dry air, making the vegetation more flammable, which sets the stage for wildfires to spread rapidly. Even a small spark or fire can grow into a large, uncontrollable blaze. While this provides some explanation for the conditions that help the fire spread, it doesn't address why these conditions are becoming more frequent and severe. The real culprit here is climate change. According to climate scientist Peter Kalmus, who works at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the current fire disaster in Los Angeles is closely linked to the changing climate. 2023 was recorded as the hottest year in history, with global temperatures averaging 1.48 degrees Celsius higher than pre-industrial times. This marks a significant shift, as temperatures in 2023 surpassed those in 2016, which had been the previous hottest year. Climate scientists weren't surprised by this. It was part of the predicted trajectory of climate change. By the end of 2023, greenhouse gas levels were at record highs. Global temperatures had risen significantly, sea levels were higher than ever, and sea ice in Antarctica had reached its lowest levels. Yet, even as the world faced such alarming statistics, progress on addressing climate change remained sluggish. The COP28 Climate Summit in late 2023 focused on reducing reliance on fossil fuels, but a major issue arose when, despite promises, global emissions actually increased by 0.8% in 2024. In fact, 2024 has already broken the temperature record set in 2023. From June 2023 to August 2024, Temperatures kept breaking records, and NASA scientists even called it an unprecedented heat streak. The fact that this fire is happening in January, normally the wettest month in California, shows how dramatically the climate has changed. In 2024, Southern California experienced extreme heat during June and July, with temperatures never seen before in the region. By July, there had been no rain, and the region dried out completely. Soon after, the Santa Ana winds began to blow, making the already dry vegetation even more vulnerable to fire. This phenomenon is part of a larger trend of increasing temperatures and more extreme weather patterns, which are all linked to human-driven climate change. When we talk about wildfires, it's essential to understand that they can have both natural and human-made causes. In California, natural causes include lightning strikes, which are common triggers for wildfires. However, human activities are responsible for the majority of wildfires. These include things like campfires left unattended, roadside sparks from vehicles, machinery hitting rocks and creating sparks, and even power lines swaying in the wind, which can trigger fires. In fact, a study from the National Park Service found that 85% of all wildfires in the U.S. are caused by human activities. The current fire in Palisades is suspected to have been triggered by firecrackers used during New Year's celebrations, though the exact cause is still under investigation. Despite the natural and human triggers, climate change is a significant factor that makes these fires more frequent and severe. Wildfires have always been a natural part of California's ecosystem. During summer months, dry weather and strong winds create conditions conducive to fire, which is why the region typically experiences wildfires from May to October. Some ecosystems even rely on fire to maintain ecological balance. For instance, conifer trees have evolved to have thick bark that protects them from fires, and certain plants depend on fire for their seeds to germinate. These periodic fires clear out dead organic material, release nutrients into the soil, and promote the growth of new plants. In such ecosystems, fire is a natural and essential process. However, the wildfires of today are no longer part of this natural rhythm. Their intensity, timing, and frequency have increased significantly due to the changing climate. Studies show that California is experiencing more extreme wildfires than ever before. The frequency of days with a high chance of wildfires in the state has increased from 66% to 90% over the past few decades, and the size of the wildfires has grown as well. The frequency of wildfires that spread over 10,000 acres has increased by 25% compared to pre-industrial times. This is particularly concerning because it indicates that not only are the fires larger, but they are occurring more frequently. Peter Kalmus, who lived in Altadena, Los Angeles for many years, became increasingly concerned about the growing threat of wildfires. In 2022, he moved his family out of California, realizing that the threat of wildfires was too great. He was particularly alarmed after the Bobcat fire in 2020, which brought intense heat and smoke to his area. By the time the fire was extinguished, his neighborhood had been surrounded by smoke, and he felt the physical effects of the heat. It was then that he knew that, eventually, his home would be at risk from a devastating fire. Sure enough, after moving to North Carolina, he watched as his old neighborhood in Altadena was destroyed by fire. The pet hospital, the church, the coffee shop, and even the hardware store were all gone. The sight of everything he once knew burned to the ground brought him to tears. Peter believes that the apocalypse is already happening, but not for everyone, just for those who have already lost their homes and livelihoods due to climate disasters. Whether in California, Hawaii, Australia, or other parts of the world, wildfires, heat waves, and floods are becoming more frequent and severe. The problem, he says, is that the root cause of these disasters is the actions of a few powerful individuals and corporations, particularly multinational oil, gas, and coal companies, that have caused the climate crisis through their unchecked emissions. In fact, a report shows that since 2016, just 57 companies have been responsible for 80% of global greenhouse gas emissions. These include major corporations like ExxonMobil, BP, and Chevron, along with state-owned companies such as Saudi Aramco and Gazprom. These companies knew decades ago that their actions would lead to irreversible climate change, but they continued to pursue profit at the expense of the planet. They actively worked to suppress climate science and block the transition to renewable energy. This is not merely speculation. There is concrete evidence backing these claims. For example, in the 1950s, fossil fuel companies funded research into air pollution in Los Angeles, all the while knowing that carbon dioxide emissions would have a global impact. They also funded misleading campaigns to delay government action on climate change. Peter Kalmus argues that these corporations should be held accountable for their actions, which have put the world in a perilous position. Had they taken action decades ago, the situation we face today might have been avoided. However, instead of taking responsibility, these corporations have spent billions of dollars lobbying politicians, funding false narratives, and blocking policies that could help mitigate the effects of climate change. The result is a world that is increasingly becoming less habitable, with more devastating fires, floods, and other extreme weather events. In his writings, Peter calls for action to address the climate crisis and hold these powerful corporations accountable. Until we do, the planet will continue to suffer, and the situation will only get worse. The climate apocalypse, as he describes it, is already here for those who are directly affected, but it's not too late to change course. The fight for a livable future is now more urgent than ever.